Welcome back to another video with Jam and Kenny. And this week I've came across a poll on People Magazine. Do you know People Magazine?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
we
mean, the people. I think some magazines are kind of going away. I feel like I can come across a few youngsters and they actually have no idea what the hell People Magazine is at all.
People Magazine was
But
big when we were young.
magazines in
It was like
general.
one of the bigger. I don't know if they're like a. I know they're not like they don't lie and stuff. So I don't want to say they're like a tabloid, but I think they were like papers that were like referred to as rags, where it was like it was rumors and stuff like that. And
Yeah, they were about. I mean, it's all celebrity. Celebrity
gossip.
and
There you go. That's what
celebrity
they are. They're gossip
gossip
magazines. Yeah.
profiles, and that was that whole world. I mean, I think you see some of them actually transition to like an online presence and did it pretty well. Some of them are starting to fade. I don't know if people, I don't know how effective or how big people is nowadays, but yeah, I mean, it was back in the day, it was, when I say that it's crazy, but, even as much as like 5 to 10 years ago, it was still pretty
Yeah, I think it was
relevant.
still pretty relevant.
It
So
still means something to be on people.
I came across a poll in People magazine because I was reading an article that they had written about some YouTubers that got married and that like nobody knew that they were dating each other. And uh, so, and like it's been sort of, it's going to be sort of on point with like movies and stuff that we've been really into recently. And the poll was that people think that movies are just entirely too long at this point. And so, when I say too long, I mean like movies that are like more than 2 hours, 3 hours. The
Well,
poll,
the poll mostly going into like what is it's asking the question, right? What is the
yeah,
ideal runtime? And what is the ideal runtime, trying to find out what people want and then also what people think is too long, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. So I think the poll finalized that 92 minutes, an hour and a half, is the perfect movie length.
Seems to have been the case for
Yeah, and I
some
think
time
I
now.
mean for a long time movies have been an hour and a half. I remember back in the day when you had black and white films and like filming was substantially harder than it as easy as it is to, it was on the opposite end of how easy it is today to film a movie. I mean, you've seen YouTubers go out and make 2 3 hour movies and it's like, oh shit, 2 3 hour videos, it's like holy crap. It's easy now. So I can see how like wanting to go longer is, dope. But I mean, growing up, I think I remember every movie I ever watched was like between an hour and an hour and a half.
An hour
You
and a
know?
half. It's like hour and a half. It was always the standard. Like it had to. If it rare, I think it was rare that it actually came below an hour and a half. But if you found, you might have found one around an hour 20 or something like that. But for the most part, you're seeing these movies come in at least an hour and a half. And
Yeah.
nowadays you're getting a lot of these movies coming up well over 2 hours. Even breaking 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
so I think it's interesting.
I just looked up a movie, a famous movie from the 90s, 1994, an hour 42 for the Street Fighter movie. Mortal Kombat, an hour 41. You know,
I
so
mean, I think those movies, when you're talking about those kind of like action films, you're also talking about. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this conversation, really, because you're
uh,
talking about an action popcorn film versus like, The Godfather or something like that, which is considered like a cinematic masterpiece, and some of these other films like that. And it'd be interesting to kind of go into like what the difference between some of those kinds of films and today. But yeah, no, an hour 42 for. I thought it would have been shorter, to be honest, for Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
right. I mean, that that makes me feel like, even though these movies are long, like Dune and all these, I mean, pacing, I think you would agree, plays a big part as well as
Hmm.
how long these movies feel. I felt that the pacing for like Dune 2 was great. I didn't even realize we were in there for like the 3 hours that we were in there,
You're locked in.
Yeah, and so I think, an hour and a half is perfect for some movies, but we got to have that wiggle room. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Yeah.
movies that are good at 3 hours, and there's movies that aren't going to be good at 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good, you're talking about some of these, when talking about these longer films, the thing is you have some of these that are actually more, it comes down to me, it is pacing, but even like if you put it generally speaking, it's just the script in general and how engaging the dialogue is. I can watch a well over 2 hour Quentin Tarantino movie where there's just a lot of talking just because the guy's got skills. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like he knows how
yeah.
to put that
When
movie
his
together.
characters are talking, you're listening because
They're
everything
interesting.
they say is either interesting or important. You know,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
I
mean, sometimes it can feel like the conversation is not interesting or is not like important at all, but that it's just interesting. Even when you take like the classic Royale with cheese conversation in Pulp Fiction, they're fucking talking about a burger. You know what I mean? But it's
yeah.
just for some reason you're in it. You're locked in like you're there with them, and I think that's just it's a certain skill that not everyone has, and so yeah, some of these films, like that these long runtime type films, I think like recently you had Killers of the Flower Moon and some of those kind of Oscar contender type films that come out and they're just dramatic, and I would say Killers of the Flower Moon is a good movie, but it's kind of like I don't know it's replayability. Have I seen that movie since when it first came out? No, I haven't. But what I still say it's a good movie to watch and everyone should watch it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, man. I don't think that movies are too long. I think that bad movies are sometimes too long. You know what I mean? Because
well, bad
because
movies are probably an hour and a half too long. Yeah, and when
yeah,
I say like an hour and a half longer than it should be, it shouldn't be at all. They
yeah.
shouldn't be made at all. But
And the reason I say that is because people, you know, rarely talk about the good stuff. They just mull over the bad shit. You know, like you're more likely to leave a good review. I'm sorry, you're more likely to leave a bad review at a restaurant you went to than a good review at a restaurant you went to. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that also this whole thing where like people are thinking these movies are too long, it's because they're probably watching long movies that they really have no interest in or would have never liked even if they were only an hour, you know? An hour and a
yeah,
half.
yeah.
They probably would have been happier to get out of there in an hour and a half instead of 2 or 3. But I
Right.
think in the long run, I honestly think it depends on if the movie's good or not. I don't think it depends so much on the length of the movie.
Yeah, I think another interesting thing that I wish they would have looked into is interviewing and splitting those numbers up between in the polls as far as like people who consider themselves movie fans or cinemaphiles, or any kind of like I mean I watch movies regularly, that kind of thing, versus people who just would consider themselves like a casual movie goer.
Yeah.
Because that's another big factor. Like I would be interested to know specifically cinemaphiles, like what do they prefer as like an ideal movie time today? You know what I mean? If is it an hour and a half too? Because I definitely think a lot of casual movie fans would an hour and a half is perfectly fine with them. But it'd be interesting to hear like what actual movie fans would have to say about that similar kind of like and specifically know that this came from people. So yeah, even if it was self-proclaimed, you know what I mean?
Like
That'd be
even
interesting to know.
I've told you and like we've said a lot, I don't consider myself like a big movie buff kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like super like I gotta watch all these. I mean, I barely took me forever to watch Poor Things, and I think that at 2.5 hours almost, that was a perfect fucking movie. It was fantastic. I'm still not over
Yeah.
that movie, dude. That movie
No,
is
I mean,
still got me mulling over thinking up here, but it was 2.5 hours almost. So I don't think it was too long, and it was still good.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
And going back to the replayability, I've watched Poor Things 3 times since I've seen it. About total 3 times total, and I would consider that like an artsy type of film. You know what I mean? And it just really comes down to how well it's crafted. But you do have some of those films that are like kind of they you can question them, and then you have like you mentioned some of these films like Kill Bill that are kind of they're action oriented films, and they're when you look at they have elements of a popcorn type of film that's just meant for you to watch it and not necessarily have to think too much and you can sit there and enjoy it and probably rewatch it over and over again. But there's also the element of like the story that it's kind of like a hybrid between like a dramatic story and an action popcorn flick. And
Yeah.
and some of them are really good at crafting that, and they really like walk that line in between. And then there's some that's just kind of like they don't quite land, you know. And I think this is just more personal opinion, but you know, the Avatar series, it's pretty big series, but you know, for me, it was like it's supposed to be one of those types of films, right? That has some certain action, it has certain visual aspects of it that make it more that give it that popcorn flair, but then at the same time, it's meant to be like a dramatic type of story, you know, for at least for certain parts of it. And especially the last one I was just like, man, you know, I could feel the time, put it to you like that. And that one ran pretty long too, and I could feel, you know, especially towards the end, I was like, this is going, and it was, you know, it's the climactic action ending, and it was still kind of a bit too much for me. But you know, so you have those kinds of movies. You know, I think about like King Kong when that came out, and I was, you know, it was cool and it was fun, the original one, or not the original, but like the recent, I think the Peter Jackson one.
Hmm.
You know, that one was like 3 hours plus, and then that, you know, that felt like it dragged quite a bit. Or it's just those movies where you're just kind of like, it was good, but then it just, they could have done without like a good 30-40 minutes of that movie, and it probably would have been in that sweet spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have those kinds of films too. I mean,
So
you,
it is possible that, you know, an extended length could be a detractor to the movie as well.
Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah, dude, it did not add anything of substance. I feel,
Some people, yeah, go ahead.
especially with the fact that like we knew they were just gonna fucking kill it out once James Gunn came in, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too. But you know, I mean, there's a good amount of people on the internet that felt like it was definitely better than what was released. And then you know, you get that kind of. I think you're, especially if you're a fan of that kind of stuff. Those kinds of extended cuts are always like a treat. I think about like the Lord of the Rings, you know, extended cuts. I love
Oh
those, man.
my god, I've
But the
I've
Lord of the
never
Rings is
watched them.
great, right?
I've never watched them.
And you've never watched them,
Not the
honestly. Like
extended
it's
cut, bro.
weirdly enough, because extended cuts are like 3 hours into 4 hours for some of them,
Yeah.
and like, you know, so they're pretty long. But you know, we're going through, honestly, watching it, I don't feel that extra time. Like, I know there's extra scenes, and some of them are cool, some of them are not. They're just added. You know, I get why they were actually cut, but at the same time, like, I love that type of movie, and I love those movies, and specifically. And so when you add this extra, just it makes it that much more rich, and you're like, like I said, I can't even really notice it, to be honest. And I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, yeah, it's 4 hours long, but
Bro,
you know, when it's a good 4 hours, you don't mind.
I miss director's cuts, bro.
You don't see them too often. Apparently it's like
Yeah.
a big deal now whenever it does happen.
Yeah, I remember that back in the 90s it was like I was reading about it because I was really deep diving into Event Horizon and how that movie had like, you know, all this shit cut out because it was like way too violent. But he's like, I have my director's cut, and they're like, you cannot put that out.
Mm,
And so then
yeah,
like I learned that it was like the directors write it into their contracts, like, hey, I have a right to, along with your release after theater and all that, I have a right to release like a director's cut.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
I think
yeah,
that's the only way you can make that happen, or you just get the whole internet to campaign for you, like Zack
yeah,
Snyder
like
did.
Snyder. I mean, I don't know. I think it really depends on the movie. You know, like
Well,
time is a construct.
here's one I'll bring up to you. Here's a controversial one: Titanic. Titanic considered one of the best movies for a lot of people. You know, it's definitely got that lasting, you know, popularity. Everybody remembers Titanic. Who,
I
yeah, I mean,
that
it's getting that old now that it's like you actually have youngsters that have no idea what Titanic is. But you know, the King of the World and all that kind of stuff that made it
Bro.
just kind of stick and last time in that way. I mean, do you remember that? I
Hey,
mean,
bro.
we're around in the VHS days. That was the
King.
first one I can remember that was
It
two
was two
tapes.
tapes. Yeah, yeah. The dog. This had to be 2 hours. This had to be 3 hours. This had to be 3 hours. There's no way they could have fit the
What would you
story
cut?
into less than. Yeah, exactly, bro. You saw why she was in love with him. You saw why. For
Yeah,
70
and
years after that, she
that
could
was the
not
first tape.
get Leo's D off her mind, bro.
The first tape was why she fell in love with him, and the second
And this
tape
thing
was
was fuck
why they're not
catastrophe.
together anymore.
Yeah, bro. It's
I
no
mean,
spoilers alert. It happened in 1912.
no, no, no. Come on
But
now, get out of here.
I don't think. I think there was stuff you could have cut, but I don't think it would have been much, dude.
And it would have been
not have
little
been.
stuff here and there.
Yeah, you
You
could
would have
have.
been
You would have
trimming
saved
slight
minutes,
fat.
bro. You would have saved minutes.
Yeah,
You weren't gonna
you
save
probably
half
could have
an
gotten
hour.
it to 3 hours and not 3 hours 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you. When I had that tape, I mean, I've definitely seen that movie, more than once. I don't know how many times.
I've seen it a ton. But yeah,
But
go.
all the way through.
Yeah,
was
I've
just-
seen
'cause
it
I'll be
like
honest with you.
I've seen it
when
like
I was-
5 times all the way through.
When the tapes, I have seen it a few times all the way through like that. But when the tapes were out, the 2 tapes, I'll be honest with you. I start with the second half. I would just watch the second tape because it started when the thing was starting to go down, and that was like my favorite part. I don't know, like the whole love story. As you get older, I'm like I had more appreciation for that part of the film, but as a kid,
Yeah, dude. I used to rewatch that scene when the ship was breaking apart. I want to be like, I would look for the details. Like, how are people
Yeah.
falling? Like, what the
you
hell's
see all
going
the
on
little
here?
people just like
Bro,
falling to their deaths.
I never forget the guy who falls and hits the propeller on his way down.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the guy that was like next to her, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was
Oh,
hanging
yeah.
on for dear life, and then just
Another
couldn't hang.
one that was long that I think didn't receive flack was Gangs of New York.
Yeah,
That was
but Gangs of
also
New York's
almost
one of
3
those like, it's one of those types of like I would consider Gangs of New York to be a better Martin Scorsese film than Killers of the Flower Moon. Could be like bias, could be just personal. I like those movies. I think it could, like, if you really walk the line well with the action and the drama, like a Quentin Tarantino film that you would see nowadays, Inglourious Bastards, those kinds of films where Django was pretty long. All those films where they just like it kind of keeps. It's like these little bits here and there that kind of pep you up, and you're like, "Whoa!" That's why I think those films are kind of great because they keep you engaged with whether it be with action. Sometimes the writing is really that good that it's just like you think of like a Godfather type of film where it's all mostly dialogue, but it's so good that it's like, okay, I get why this is so great, and it's very long and you don't mind it, and because it's got a bunch of classic lines that it's one of the most quoted movies of all time, I would say. Honestly, I think even as loved as it was and as great as it was when it released recently, John Wick 4, dude, for it to be that long and be pretty much all action and really not like somehow manage to not get you bored, like, because sometimes you can get bored of that, like it's just you go through and you're like, man, this is too long, and it's just because it's not keeping you locked in the way it should. And I've seen films like that where it just felt like this is almost too much and it's not really that great to where it's actually keeping me locked in like that, and I'm sitting there feeling like this is too much. I didn't feel like John Wick was too long at all. Like I wanted more, you know what I mean?
All right, I'll give you one last one. You tell me if it worked or not. Is above? It was more than 2 hours. The Matrix.
The Matrix.
Matrix 1.
Matrix 1 in particular, I think it maybe I honestly I loved it, but that was also had the added benefit of having that, like, it introduced us to this where the first one specifically, even more even like it just introduced us to the world, so it's like you're kind of entranced in what's going on, and then the action that comes into, you're sitting there kind of like that was, to me, that's the best of the three. But I think an even better question would have been like the second or the third one specifically, because you can kind of put it up there with like the Lord of the Rings and those kinds of trilogies that all the films were kind of great in their own way, but
All right.
is the second or the third one a bit too long? Can it feel like that? So there are those movies where you watch them and you're just like, oh damn, man, we still got like 30 minutes to go, and it feels like it's gonna end soon, but then it doesn't. I think that's where you run into problems. But uh, I would say Matrix One perfectly okay with that. I mean, I don't even feel that time frame.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess we decided it depends on the movie.
It depends
It
on the movie.
depends on the
But
movie.
side note here, another recent one that this is a great movie, but if it just was like a little bit shorter, I probably would have loved it even more. Is the Batman, the recent Batman film?
Oh, you son of a bitch! I think you was gonna bring that up. I was trying to get out of here before you said it. I thought
It's
the
about
Batman was perfect, and I'm not gonna tell you why. Do not cut anything.
do not cut anything.
Do not cut
I
anything.
mean, there was. I mean, but it's 3 hours long, dude. For a Batman
Yeah.
movie. Yeah, I'm like, ah.
You know what the
I
worst
don't
part
know.
about the worst
The
part
whole
about
last
that?
part of it felt like it was just too much.
No, no. What it was every long ass scene, every minute and a half long scene, with him just being sad on screen.
Yeah, yeah,
Bro,
that
people
that definitely
hated that,
dragged.
but that's one of my
That
favorite
that's
parts of the movie, and I don't know why. It's just Bruce Wayne being fucking sad.
It perfectly mimics your dark heart.
Yeah, bro, it's fucking sad boy Batman, dog. I thought it
Yeah,
was hilarious
yeah.
every time he was
There
sad.
is a lot of like long drawn out scene, which is interesting because who else does a lot of that kind of like not slow mo in that way, but Zack Snyder actually does like a lot of like things like that where he'll have slow mo type effects
Yeah,
happening in his films, and it's just like whoa, and it's dragging out here, and
yeah.
and with not much substance to go in between. This one actually has a substance for it, but that's why I bring it up because I'm like, to me that's an interesting one to talk about because you will have people who are like, no, that movie was great all the way through,
You
and then you
literally
have
could
other
have cut
people
out like half an hour of him being sad.
that yeah, yeah. I see. I haven't really fleshed out why exactly it felt like it dragged on and what could you have cut out, things like that. But it. I just remember sitting there in the theater and being like, oh damn, there's still like we still have this whole final act to go through where they actually uncover the Riddler's plan, and he has to save the day,
It was a good
and
ass
it's just
plan too.
yeah, no, that I thought it was great too. I did think overall I'm saying the movie was awesome, but there was a part of me that's just like, man, if there was just a way they could cut that down, like at least 20 minutes, 25 minutes or something like that. 2.5 hours. If that movie came in at 2.5 hours, there's something I don't know why. I just feel like it would have been that much more greater.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for tuning in with us. Thank you for sitting and hearing us out. But let us know in the comments what movies you thought or maybe too long. Maybe there's a movie that you thought, fuck, this could have been longer, and I would have still watched it. But thank you again for watching this week, and we'll just leave you with peace.